We are recording as well as streaming live, and I did send the link to the Boxcast where anybody who wants to watch us live can do so this evening, and I'll make sure I send that out in all of our future communications. And then I just wanted to remind folks to please use the raise hand button while we're in this big room. So our first order of business is we are going back to high capacity transit. There was some confusion. I won't go into the details with the vote last week. We did end up actually with a 7-3 vote still at the end of it. To prevent that from happening, we're going to change up a couple things, one that's visible, one that's invisible. In future, I will have a slide. It was very confusing, and watching the recording definitely understood that that was very confusing. So there will be a slide up that will clearly say what the options are going forward. And then I've got a much more detailed spreadsheet running in the background to help with that tracking. So we won't have that happen again. But because we are going to go back to high capacity transit, speaking of that slide, this should look not familiar, but remember these things. We're going to just revisit this conversation and redo a vote on this area if that's what the group wants to do. We had ended the conversation to move to the vote between two options. A lot of the group had expressed that they would like to remove, ideally, both sections 52 and 53 from the charter. And so that was option number one. But a lot of the group either felt that politically that might not be the wisest move and may be kind of a poison pill in the final charter, because there are folks who still feel very strongly about the original requirement for voter approval for light rail taxes and fees, or folks felt that we should ask for voter approval before adding or increasing taxes or fees around light rail construction. And so option number two was to renew that voter approval requirement and then still remove that section 53. And John, please go ahead.
Kim, I was wondering if we could actually vote on them separately. In other words, let's vote on removing section 53 and then have another vote on what we do with section 52 instead of trying to combine them in an option one and an option two.
That's great. We can definitely do that. So. There's my. So it look like that, John? Do not renew, and then renew voter approval requirement versus section 53, remove from charter, and then do not remove from charter?
Correct, but let's vote on, no, we're in section 53, they were both removed from charter, just, yeah, correct. Okay. Remove and do not remove, and then on 52, we'll talk about how we want to do.
Okay, great. Do we want to start just with the beginning of the night with this vote on section 53? Okay.
Kim, I'm going to suggest you do a quick summary or we just remind everybody what it is. And I think my memory of the discussion was that there was pretty uniform feeling about this one, but can you kind of re-summarize it maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. So section 53 basically said that the city takes the stance that it is against high capacity transit and required quite a few things, but that included that the city send a letter to various folks telling them that they are reforming like ODOT and et cetera, other state groups and regional groups, that Tigard as a point of policy is against high capacity transit. Shelby, am I missing anything on section 53?
So the only thing would be the authorization ordinance, so that it also said that Tigard couldn't amend its land use regulations without an authorization ordinance. It couldn't, so that was where we had to define what is the authorization ordinance. So what land use regulations are we talking about? what is road capacity, and a couple other details that were then voted on in the 2017 election.
Thank you. So looking at section 53, Jason makes a really great point that the group was pretty universally in favor of removing this from the charter. So I don't think we actually need to do the vote on section 53 unless there's anyone who feels differently about that and would like to call for a vote. John, your hand is up, but I think it might be left over from before. Okay. All right, so
I will only add one thing, and Zachary wasn't here last time, so he would have missed the commentary. So I'm glad you redid it because he is a voting member, and it's good for him to hear that information.
thank you, appreciate that. And hi, Zachary, I hadn't seen you join us, but yes, I'll make sure we recap. Thank you. All right, so if Zachary, does that give you enough of the background information to feel comfortable with discussing moving forward on section 53? Okay, great. So if everyone wants to nod, I think I can see everyone's faces that we're okay with, you're nodding to say that we are recommending removal of section 53 from the Tigard City Charter. Okay, great. So let's move on to section 52. So section 52 is a clause in the city charter that says Tigard will not move forward with a light rail construction project or move forward with a fee or tax to fund the construction of a light rail project without going to the voters for approval. This charter clause did have a sunset date in it. That sunset date recently passed, so it is actually currently no longer in effect. The discussion was around whether or not we should renew that without a sunset period, basically going forward as the new policy and new clause in the charter. So voting to not renew would just effectively remove section 52 from the charter and continue it kind of as it is now. And renewing the voter approval requirement would renew the section 52, but we had also recommended, or the recommendation that had been proposed was to still rewrite it to be more clear as to what exactly the amendment or what exactly the clause was asking for voter approval upon, knowing that there are both local and regional considerations that go into transit. Does anyone want to add anything to that summary? Let's see, Derek, please.
Just a question. I was kind of thinking about it since our last meeting. If this section already sunsetted, doesn't this kind of make it a moot point? Why are we debating whether or not to include something that's sunsetted into the new charter?
There was a feeling from a few members in the group from last week that they disagreed that it should have been sunset and wanted it to remain within the charter and wanted to renew it. Does that answer your question, Derek?
It does. It just, it seems interesting to me. It did sunset, so it already did. That's why it seemed interesting to me.
Okay, thank you. And John, please.
Yeah, Derek, it was more from a political standpoint that the people that put this measure before us last time, that they would come out and vote against the charter as a whole, because we were trying to railroad them or hide it or take it out. And so it was more from that standpoint. They probably would prefer to see 52 and 53 both left in there. This was some way of leaving something in there to try and appease them a little bit. But before we actually go to a vote of it, I'm glad people are talking about it. I think we should sort of talk about the other sheet that you sent us, Kim, on the additional guidance before we actually vote on it.
Interesting. So I guess I thought that we would, depending on how this conversation went, the additional guidance conversation may or may not be relevant.
That's true too. So, yeah.
But I'm happy to at least go through what those questions were that were in the guidance, just as more kind of discussion or thoughts that if this went into effect, then you should also consider that these are things that we would have to discuss. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that or see what everybody else says.
Well, why don't we go through, I think there were a few other comments and that were about our previous discussion, and then we can go into the next. Tony, please.
Oh, one of the things, can you hear me okay? Am I coming through? Okay, thank you. One of the things that was brought up that I was aware of at the time, but I wasn't keeping in mind when we had the conversation was there are a lot of, I say a lot of, I don't know the exact numbers, but there are some people that have a sense that light rail can bring in crime along with the stops. And I guess there's, some data that supports that position. So I'm mindful that the people that would want that to be in there and that are coming from that position, I think crime is a valid concern. And I really kind of consciously revisited if there had been light rail active in Tigard during the events in 2020, there could have been large numbers of people using that mass transit to come to smaller communities like Tigard that aren't equipped to handle large crowds. And that could have been a very different world. So I wasn't originally thinking that way, and I wasn't opposed in that kind of, I wasn't thinking of crime as a reason why I would have any concern of light rail, but thinking ease of transit is really great for people that want to do good things. Ease of transit isn't necessarily as good if people want to do bad things. So that's just kind of, I think it's valid to let the voters see if they want tax dollars and fees to be assigned to it. Because as Shelby brought up, we can't really stop light rail. It's a state thing. So that's just, people can decide whether they want their money to go towards it or not.
Thank you, Tony. Karen, please.
Yeah, I'm remembering in the beginning meetings that it was suggested, especially on this topic, that we might put an alternate thing on the ballot. And I'm wondering if, now that I'm thinking through that, I'm wondering if we have a third option that's for sure put it in, for sure take it out, or a third option of, yes, we recommend that we put this as an option or a separate vote on the ballot so that it isn't an all or none option. And also, the additional guidance that was required to me made it seem like the whole thing should go in the taxes and fees discussion rather than talking through it just for this topic and then answering all these kinds of questions again when we talks about taxes and fees.
Thank you, Karen. And Lindsay, please.
Yeah, I last time, had voted to include some language because I think Jason and John have a very valid point that we want to be politically savvy and get this through. But Derek's comment just made me kind of like rethink about this actually, because he's right. This did expire. So in a way, if people felt really strongly about having this language included in the charter, you'd think there'd be like a little more movement around the fact that it has expired and that language would need to be renewed. So I don't know, the way he said it made me kind of rethink about that, is that, maybe it's not as big of a deal as we're kind of anticipating, that it did expire, and rather than bring more attention to it, maybe make some assumptions that if people felt really, really strongly about it, they would already be kind of doing their own movement to get wording back in, because it otherwise would need to be renewed anyways.
Jesse and Shelby, either John or Jason, can you confirm that there hasn't been any movement to renew that section?
There hasn't been any recent political movement that I'm aware of. John can confirm that too. I don't know that Shelby would know necessarily maybe she would, the political part of that. I do think that, to Lindsay's point, the worst language we have in the charter, I'll just remind everybody, all the worst language we have, like the most poorly written sections, were all added by voter approval. And I will just remind us of that. If we want to have better language, if we have a charter that reflects what matters to people and was written better, I think we're better off. I agree with Lindsay generally, but I will just make that sort of additional point too, that, one way to ensure we have poor language in the charter is to let it be sort of written by people that don't know a lot about the city and just want to add it to the charter.
Thank you, Jason. And Margaret. Oh, John, did you have something to add?
I was just going to answer her question because you opened it up for us. Lindsay, no, there hasn't been, but that group hasn't been told that we're talking about removing it from the charter either. They don't know that section 53 is being voted on to be removed. So my point being is the issue is, yeah, they would love to see them both, but I have a feeling they'd be upset that either one were removed, and they could still come back and do this. So I don't think this will appease them. I think it does help in some way, other ways.
Thanks, John. And Margaret, please.
Okay, a couple of points. One, Tony, or earlier, I was involved in the light rail when it started out going out to Gresham, and that the idea came up in the 70s. And the arguments that were used for light rail going to Gresham, for light rail going to Milwaukee, for light rail going to Hillsborough, and also the proposed that we had on the Columbia River crossing of light rail going into Vancouver were the same things, that bad people will come in and they'll, do things. That was every time we've done that. And I think the statistics show that that's not really the case. And I think the reason is if you're going into a community to steal something, you're not going to go back up on light rail and come back with it. And that was kind of what it is. And so I think what it is I would prefer, we don't have anything in our charter about yes or no to high capacity transit. Just ignore it. I think that I don't think there's probably a council person that's ever been elected that would not say, if we are going to add a tax to our people, we need to vote on it. We need to put it up in front of them. And so I think that's what the two issues, the light rail thing, dump it. And, the idea of voting on a high capacity transit, I'm not quite sure that's a real prudent thing. And then we also have the discussion on fees, but maybe you've got that in just under another part of the charter period that is not tied into high capacity transit.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Margaret. And Zachary, please.
I think that when talking about, voter approval for things like change in taxes for providing like funds for like, light rail in the future, or things like that, as with like, this measure, I think voter approval is really important, because if I were going to put any of my money towards, something for the city, I'd want to know that at least I had a vote in it. That way it just doesn't really go like, unnoticed as much. And maybe that's why, many people haven't really seen like little like nuances of like the charter review committee, because it's not that they're not paying attention to it, but like things don't really become as obvious to the public eye unless it's directly affecting them, I feel like.
Thank you, Zachary. And Jeanette, please.
Okay, thank you, Kim. It's been referenced a couple of times that there could be another section with regards to fees. Is that accurate? And if so, would that then be one of the options? I think Karen may have alluded to this, that option then be we address fees in that section. And the reason is because light rail may not be the option. Times have changed. It could be some other transit option. So just asking that question.
Yes, so several meetings ago, taxes and fees as a general topic was risen. And so we kind of tabled it for later, and it's right now, I think, scheduled for our second to last meeting to discuss taxes and fees in the charter. and staff has been at work doing a lot of research into what those look like in other charters, as well as preparing some presentations on what taxes and fees look like currently in Tigard. But yes, a lot of this could roll up into that later. If we got too into the nuances of taxes and fees in general, I would recommend that we table that for the later discussion. Tony, please.
On that, I think since that seems to be the support and process is the taxes and fees being voted on or not voted on. And I'm hearing what Margaret said and what Jeanette said. So is it possible to table 52 into the taxes and fees section? Because it sounds like that's the appropriate place to address the concerns with 52, or is that wrong?
We could, we absolutely could, and I'm definitely seeing John nodding. I do want to say that it would be highly unusual for there to be a blanket voter approval requirement for taxes and fees for a city. So I don't anticipate that that would be where we would move to in that taxes and fees discussion, as much as into individual taxes and fees and different types of taxes and fees, which is much more common. Not much more common, but there are instances where it exists in other charters in the state of Oregon. So just to set some expectations about what that conversation is going to look like in comparison to what is typical and what is effective, like what does and does not essentially can really damage a city's ability to fund itself.
So does someone have input on how that could look for 52 to address both the concerns of including voter approval for something that might include light rail? So that would accommodate the people that have that concern, but also, not trip up the city's ability to, like you said, I guess it's unusual to have blanket voter approval.
Yeah. So I mean, if that is the group's consensus that you want to discuss this particular tax and fee and maybe including waiving its sunset and renewing it in our later discussion around taxes and fees, we can move that forward. I saw John nod. I don't know if there's any other support for that or if folks would like to continue to discuss it tonight. Carol, please. Oh, you're muted, Carol.
There we go. Yeah, I just wanted to remind people that light rail, I mean, it's kind of an equity issue, light rail or rapid bus, whatever we do. There are people that need to get to jobs in Tigard, and there are people that live in Tigard that need to go elsewhere. And while you may not want it personally, it could be a real boon for, different kinds of people. And another thing is that the city talks about, reducing cars on the road, reducing emissions and all this stuff. And this could be a way. It just seems to me, it kind of bothers me that, 53 has to go because that's really saying we're, against this. I just don't know why this one thing needs to be carved out when it kind of goes against what we say we're about, and it's just not inclusive. I mean, it would hurt a lot of people to get rid of different modes of transportation. So I would like to see both of them go, but I do like the idea of the expanded tax discussion.
Okay, thank you, Carol.
And it's, one more thing, and because it's sunsetted, that to me would be enough of a response to people that wanted it in there.
Thank you.
They may be back, but why didn't they come before?
And Jason, please.
Well, Carol, if it comes back, it'll come back certainly more poorly written would be the concern there. And I just want to emphasize your equity points. I think I made those last meeting and I would reinforce them again. I think access to transit is a major equity issue. And something that we need to think of in that way. I think that the tax or fee raising issue related to this, I guess I can live with that as sort of a compromise, and maybe that's the discussion for later. I don't know. I feel like I'm not being very articulate right now, but I think it could be a political mistake to not sort of recognize the tax and fee part of this.
Thank you. And Jeanette, please.
Thanks, Kim. Can I ask just for clarification, in the documents that were provided, there's one that was titled Additional Guidance for High Capacity Transit. Can you just explain was that something that was from a former council? Was that something that staff was asking us to define? If there's not context in it in the meeting notes, so if you could just help me, that'd be terrific.
Yeah, sorry, absolutely. So based on the discussion and erroneous vote from last time, we started drafting a new section 52. And when Shelby had begun that process, there were a couple questions that came up that needed further guidance from this group. So Shelby had drafted that language, provided those questions, some additional context. And so that was if this group continued down the yes, we want to renew 52 tonight when we do the vote, or if we decide to table it for later, that was to help with that conversation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, is there anyone who feels very strongly? All right, Nathan, please.
Sorry. I was just going to add that I've been struggling to come up with a decisive position on this post our previous votes, especially looking at some of those new guidance questions. My mind just kind of immediately went to no to all of them, because in the original vote, I was definitely in the camp of, well, no, I don't really want either 52 or 53 in there, but I feel like we kind of need to. But now that I'm hearing some things about, are the people who really wanted 52 and 53 in there in the first place, are they going to be happy with any watered down version of it that we put in? I kind of suspect they won't be. And so I kind of worry that we're putting in something that either will, hamstring the council in some way in the future, or is so watered down that it's, pointless or disingenuous. And the people who weren't going to be happy still aren't going to be happy.
Thank you, Nathan. And Derek, please.
Just to echo Nathan's point, it's sunset for a reason. And if we have something to sunset, it's because we're anticipating we're going to revisit it at a later time. And if it's valid, then we would re-bring up the issue. I don't think we need to be carrying water for these folks. If they think it's important, they can bring it back before the voters all over again.
Thank you, Derek. And Margaret.
Okay, good points from that the gentleman just brought up earlier. And then also just kind of one side thing, when this was done before, a lot of the people that were behind it were not necessarily, they weren't citizens of Tigard. And so I think that's one thing to kind of look at. But, I think Zachary was right. If our voters really, the majority of our voters really want something, they will come to us. And so, so I haven't really changed my mind to get rid of the light rail stuff, but deal with fees and so on someplace else. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. And Jeanette, please.
Yeah, I think just going back to the political context, I think the concern was if the charter goes in front for a vote, that if this is used as one of the mechanisms, oh, look, they took out 52, 53, then folks wouldn't vote for the charter period, so the revision. So I think that was the concern. And I think that still continues to be concern. I don't think, and I agree with, Nathan and Derek and Margaret, but people tend to, once there's a threat, once light rail were to possibly come back, or high capacity bus lanes, that's when people get energized, and that's when there could be some discussion. So they may not be paying attention to it now, but they certainly could if this topic were raised. And I'd hate for it to be utilized as a way not to review the charter, but that was the context for why we were going to consider keeping a version of 52 in. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Does anyone feel very strongly that they do not want to continue this conversation tonight and would like to table it to the remainder of it for taxes and fees in June? Karen, yes, you feel strongly that you would like to? Yes. Does anyone feel very strongly that you would like to vote on section 52, whether to remove or renew this evening? And Tony, please.
Sorry, I'm in the same, but I kind of feel like it would be better to address this in the context of taxes and fees, because I'm not able to visualize in my head what it would look like in that conversation. If there's a way to address the concern without keeping 52 or modifying 52 so it actually fits into taxes and fees better, I can't see that future because we're not having that conversation yet. So I feel sort of strongly that it belongs there. I'm because I'm one of the people that originally supported this inclusion in the first place. So I'm kind of thinking about it from, my position back then, and I had no idea that it was sunsetting. I voted for it. I didn't know that it would go away. So I don't know. I understand the context that Shelby brought up, that it doesn't really matter if we want it or not because it's a state thing. So it might make you feel good to vote for something, but it might not actually influence the end product. So that's why I think it could be more important to have it in a tax and fee context.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And the reason why I'm asking this group this question about whether discuss or table is just we've had so much conversation between last meeting and this meeting around the context is my only concern around tabling it to June and maybe rehashing, but it also gives folks a chance to think about it some more. Zachary, go ahead.
I also agree with Tony too, because I feel like it's a pretty important topic and it's a lot easier once you kind of hear the little bits about the whole policy to really think about voting yes or no, rather than if we just kind of table it off till later. We can still vote on it, but we'll have to reintroduce this conversation back into our heads a bit to try to put ourselves in the same position we were at before, because sometimes it's harder just to jump into something right after you're done with something else. So it might be more productive to do it today.
Thanks, Zachary. And Jason, please.
Well, Zachary just made, I guess, one of the things I was thinking about made the same point, and that is that we've now had the discussion twice, and Kim, you mentioned this too, we're going to get to have the whole reintroduction to this and rehash the whole thing yet a third time. I'm okay with that if that's everybody's preference. I'm not sure it's the most efficient way if we all kind of, from a policy perspective, maybe we want to say, yeah, we want this to be sort of addressed in the taxes and fees section, and it needs to get addressed. Like our decision point tonight is we probably are going to require some sort of a vote if there's an increase in taxes or fees, and we'll work the details out during the conversation in the future, I guess, so that we don't have to revisit and rehash all of what we've already talked about twice. The other thing this is making me think about, and Shelby, I know there's really specific requirements about how and what can be sort of brought by the people as a referendum, but I'm wondering if there should be, and if there could be, a charter discussion that's specific to really anything we could do to get better language in our charter instead of just poorly written stuff. So either a requirement that before something can, I don't know, we don't have to work that now, but this is making me think that maybe should be a component to consider, is if we're going to take the approach that some are suggesting now and just sort of let it come up again if it does, how could we avoid it being such poorly written language in the future?
Thank you. And Karen, please.
Yeah, my desire to punt it is not to discuss it a third time, but just to generalize taxes and fees as a total, as a whole. But I can't help but go back to adding a third option of having an option on the ballot, because the only reason I'm hearing to put something in, some rewritten version of 52, is for political purposes. And that's not a great reason to put something in a charter. That's not, it just isn't. So if it's that we want to appease some of the voters, I just feel like we got to put in an option on the ballot instead of all or none, putting it in or out tonight.
Yeah, and Karen, I hear your request for that third option. We really should only vote between two at any given time, but I think coming back to this conversation about there, especially maybe towards the end of our work, about looking at all of the recommendations holistically and deciding if there's any that you recommend that we take out and do separately, I think would be a really good like final approach. Does that work? Okay. So here is what I'm hearing, and I really liked Jason's suggestion that we discuss tonight, basically, whether or not we are interested in even renewing Section 52 at all, and if so, discussing the nuances and the details with the rest of the taxes and fees discussion. So the way that would look is here. So it'd be option one would essentially be do not renew, and then let it sunset as the recommendation. And then option two would be to renew the voter approval requirement and discuss later in the taxes and fees discussion.
Yep.
And I realize
That'd be discuss the details.
as I use discuss, versions of discuss very close together. Does everyone feel that this represents our conversation this evening?
I have a question.
Margaret.
Yes, Margaret. So the thing where it says renew voter approval requirement and discuss details, is that just dealing with taxes and fees? Are we not even, the dump, like, don't even talk about mass transit stuff? Is that just talking about fees?
It's just talking about light rail construction taxes and fees. Because this is only referring to Section 52. So recommend renewing voter approval requirement for light rail construction.
Because I had one other question. Can I ask the cat what she thinks about?
This is Lilith. She's decided she likes being up here because this is
She
the
is.
room in the house.
Very, very seriously listening to this conversation and the debate. So
She's a very politically savvy cat.
yes, she is.
Derek, please.
I was gonna say, I don't think those are analogous, right? One would be do not renew, and then the other is that we do renew and then discuss it in taxes and fees. Wouldn't it be do not renew and then discuss during taxes and fees also? Because it seems like that's gonna come up at the same time. Like these don't seem equivalent is what I'm getting at.
Mhm.
We don't want to rehash the whole thing. I mean, that's
The point is that they are not equivalent. If you decided that you do not want to renew light rail, then we would not specifically taxes and fees around light rail. We would not discuss taxes and fees around light rail in our later taxes and fees discussion. You would be removing that from the table. I would entertain a motion to vote on these two options.
Motion.
Is there a second?
second.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, let me find my Excel sheet. Carol Krager.
So I vote not to renew.
Derek Lawson.
Not to renew.
Jason Snyder.
Not to renew.
Jeanette Shaw,
To renew.
John Cook,
To renew.
Karen Emerson,
Do not renew.
Lindsay Murphy,
Do not renew.
Margaret Doherty,
Do not renew.
Nathan Jackson,
Do not renew.
Tony Simpson,
Renew.
and Zachary Claremont.
Renew.
All right, a vote of 7-4, that does fail. So based on our conversations, that would mean that we default to what is currently in the charter, which would be the sunsetted Measure 52, and it would not be renewed. I'm going to say, because we did not reach consensus on this evening, if this does want to somehow make its way back up during the taxes and fees discussion, we will not specifically target it, but that it would make sense that if it did come up again in that section, but that we'll move on from it this evening, unless folks feel very differently. Karen, please.
I want to make sure, because in reality, you're mentioning a third option that I just want to make sure everybody knew was the third option, was to keep the language that's in there, to recommend to keep the language that's in there.
Well, it's not really that we would keep the language.
Well, it failed. So if it failed, the default is that we're keeping the language.
But Karen, this language is not in the charter now. It's sunset.
Yeah,
Anymore.
it's already been removed. So we're just not putting it back in the charter. All right, thank you, Jason and Margaret. All right, so we are going to move on this evening to our form of government conversation. Big shift. So we went into breakout rooms in our last meeting and specifically discussed between the sometimes called strong mayor form of government or the mayor council form of government versus what is Tigard's current form of government, which is the council manager form. From the two groups, we had different conversations. I'm going to try to recap them the best that I remember. I was only in one of the rooms, and then I'm going to invite anybody else who would like to share their recollections from those conversations as well. In the room that I was in, there were general thoughts that there are, as there are in every organization, some issues within Tigard, some conversation about friction that can exist between established city managers and staff versus elected officials, how a mayor council government may or may not be the solution for addressing that. But there was generally a feeling that the manager council form of government, council manager form of government, my apologies, works very well. And that was the general feeling, was that there's concerns. There may be a reason to make a shift, but that generally the council manager government is being effective. In the other room, I wasn't in, but I understand the conversation was largely in favor of the council manager form of government. I'd like to open it up to anyone to either add to what the conversation was in your room, or to just continue that discussion this evening now that we're all together in one big group. And Jason, please.
I shared in my small group that when I entered my time as mayor, so that also includes all my time as a city councilor, and then the first maybe year or so of my time as mayor, I was a pretty big fan of the council manager form of government, and sort of a fan of it for Tigard. I just feel like I need to express this, having been the mayor and having been through a lot of different interactions over a decade plus of time, that I became at least aware from observation. And I mean, I'm pretty hard on sort of my own leadership and leadership in general. It's part of what I do in my regular day job in healthcare as a leader. And my observation is this, that I feel like I need to share with everybody. There is a very different level of accountability and responsiveness to the people in a community when the directors of the departments in a city are directly reporting to someone who is an elected official. And I came to that conclusion after watching a lot of other cities and watching our own city. This is not me saying I think we should change the form of government. I will just tell you that the council for a long time, through many different members of the council and even different mayors, has attempted to move the sort of responsiveness and accountability, particularly at that director level, to make it more community responsive. And I think we mostly have felt like we failed at doing that. And I just feel an obligation to share that observation and the fact that my feelings about this changed as I went through time because of challenges and problems that I saw not get solved. So I'm not going to say more. I just felt like I really want to make sure everybody hears that once, so you can put that into your consideration here.
Thank you, Jason. And Jeanette, please.
Thank you. And I was in the other group, Kim, and we had also agreed that the council manager form of government was both equitable, but also given the different electeds, we're not as experienced or as professional staff in many realms that a city manager would be, and the staff that that person would hire. We felt the council manager position was best served and the best model for the city of Tigard. And I believe former Mayor Cook was in that group as well. So with that, that was our update, and hand that back over to you.
Thank you. And Margaret, please.
And I agree 100% with what Jeanette said. And I think with one additional caveat is that the council manager is much a better situation, because the politics of I need to do this so I can get reelected kind of thing are out. The politics are not a factor. And I think that there's a reason why there are no cities anymore that have the strong mayor situation. And I think that's part of it. So I just totally agree with Jeanette and John.
Thank you, Margaret. Just want to clarify, there are cities that do have that. They just aren't in Oregon of the same size as Tigard.
Yeah. Thank you for the clarification. There are none in Oregon. There was one, Beaverton dumped it, so there are no more in Oregon.
Currently, yes. Portland will be one in 2 years. And Tony, please.
Yes, I think in my group, I was probably the only person that was strongly in favor of the strong mayor position. When it's more shared, I feel like, and to speak to Margaret's point, I think that doing things to make sure that you get reelected is a strong motivator for a political candidate to do things that the public supports. If there's no fear that the activities that are carried on in that environment are within or without the will of the people, then that's where I think you see cities that start that downward spiral, because there's a lot of cities that we can point to that have that don't seem to have that fear of being replaced. And it just seems like a lot of things have changed for the negative in the last, decade or so in a lot of cities. So that would be my concern. If the current trend is going in a way that supports the current downward spiral, then I would like to shift and go in a direction that at least try something different to see if Tigard can have more positive results.
Could you maybe specify a little bit more what you mean by specific cities and downward spiral? It seems very general, so I just want to know if you had any examples.
Just increase in crime, increase of homelessness, increase of graffiti, loss of property values, loss of law enforcement personnel. Just kind of those are things that I see as negatives personally, is increased crime. I mean, like just in Tigard, there's been a lot of break-ins and stuff that are in my area. First time in 20 years, there's people dancing in my neighborhood that are high on drugs. I've never seen people wandering around high. So to me, granted, that's Tigard. So, and Tigard's still kind of doing the same thing. And I wouldn't call Tigard in that downward spiral, but it's definitely a different world than what it was when I first moved into Tigard. So that's just kind of, I think that a strong mayor puts the mayor a little bit more in a position of contention, not hostile, but just they are more vulnerable than a mayor city council collective.
Thank you, Tony. Does anyone else have thoughts that they'd like to share with the group around Tigard's form of government? Karen, please.
I have a question. Beaverton's charter specifically said that the council would do an annual review of the city manager, and I did not see that language in Tigard's charter and wondered if the council does do an annual review of the city manager.
John, I see you nodding. Why don't you go ahead?
Yes, we do an annual review. It's a written review. It happens every year. It's actually a 360 review. We actually go out to the public. We go to the fire chief. We go to the chamber president. We go to maybe some other electeds. And so it's very thorough. And it comes back to the council as a whole. And then the council in the executive session reviews all of that and then discusses pay or anything else and or issues that need to be improved. But to me, that's something that doesn't need to be in a charter. I mean, it's something that you do every year. You know, that's weighting a charter down to me. And why Beaverton put that in there? They're brand new. They don't even know what they've done. I'm sure they put that in there because they didn't know that people do that.
Thank you, John. And Karen, did you have any follow-up?
Sure. I was asking because of Jason's, what I heard him saying was, I don't know, I felt like he was saying that it's hard to get rid of the city manager. And well, you did say that last meeting. And I just question if they really aren't doing what the council wants them to be doing, then the council would have that in the review and would get rid of the manager. But
Jason, please go ahead.
Karen, I think my response was, it may have been implied that that was what was being meant, but that was not my intention. And I recall, I think in the prior meeting, sort of trying to call out the distinction I was attempting to make, but I'm not going to try to recreate it now. What I will say, I think the comment was about, you know, whether it's easier to get rid of a city manager or, you know, well, anyway, I'm not even going to try. I remember the conversation in the general, I was trying to make a specific distinction, but I clearly failed to communicate that well. What I am trying, or what I was trying to indicate though, is that we've not been able to get the widespread organizational culture change in the current form of government. I have to think that could be better and easier in another. I'm not sure that's the main important thing, and I'm not sure how I'm going to land on this. I'm not coming to this discussion saying I want one particular thing. I just wanted to share that concern, and I think the council manager form of government so far has not delivered, and I don't think it's because of, we've had 2 or 3 very capable city managers in that time who have actually put huge amounts of effort into trying to get the results that we're looking for on the culture change front and haven't been able to. And that's actually what caused me to conclude what I'm saying. I don't think these are city managers that are not competent. That's not what I'm saying at all. And nor am I saying they should depart. I'm simply saying that when you have an entrenched significantly entrenched culture that you're trying to change, you know, having the CEO essentially be the person trying to make it happen, and somehow that clashes with city culture and government culture and just has not moved. That's what I'm trying to communicate.
Thank you, Jason. And Zena, I had seen your hand. Did you still want to go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I favor the current setting, like mayor and manager, sorry, the council and manager, because it's really segregates the responsibilities in a way. But I don't like a strong mayor because the decisions what they make may be biased in that sense. And I don't know exactly what is CEO, what Jason was saying, because he was a mayor, he knows what happened earlier. So maybe the CEO option, whatever he says, I don't know about that.
Thank you, Zena. Would anyone else like to share their thoughts with the group who hasn't spoken on this one yet this evening? Carol, please.
Yeah, I like the council manager setup, because, you know, you might get a mayor who elected who, like Mayor Snyder, who, you know, is a manager and is a leader in an organization and would adapt to that kind of role over personnel and processes and budgets, you know, very easily. But what if the mayor who's elected isn't as comfortable in those other roles? And so to me, it would be kind of a gamble. And, you know, with the city manager, which council hires, they can pick and they set out their expectations. You know, that they're at least going to be able to cover the day-to-day things, and hopefully they're taking the input from council and spreading that out and supporting that with staff. But that's my main thing, is not everybody, you know, they might be a good political leader, but they may not be good with managing a staff and all the things that go on to run a city.
Thank you, Carol. Anyone else? I would entertain a motion to vote between continuing with the council manager form or recommending a change in government to a mayor council form.
I move that we stick with the council manager form of government.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? So maybe the single most, this is a pretty big one, so we're gonna go ahead and vote. Carol Krager.
Yes.
Stay with the council manager.
Yes, the
Yes.
motion.
Derek Lawson.
Stay with council manager.
Okay. Jason Snyder.
Council manager.
Jeanette Shaw.
Council manager.
John Cook.
Option 2.
Karen Emerson.
Yes, council manager.
Lindsay Murphy.
Council manager.
Margaret Doherty. Oh, you're muted, Margaret.
Option 2, council manager.
Nathan Jackson.
Council manager.
Tony Simpson.
Option 1.
Mayor council. Yep. And Zachary Claremont.
Council manager.
All right, with a vote of 10-1, that does pass, and we voted to continue with the recommending the council manager form of government. And we have an hour left in our time together. So now that we know what form of government, we're going to go ahead and move into mayoral powers. I've got a brief presentation that I'm going to pull up and share with the group. Okay, mayoral powers. So in Tigard's city charter, I would not blame you for not being able to find all of the mayoral powers. They are scattered. But we are going to go over the current powers and some requirements of the Tigard mayor. We've read, Jesse, what, 30 city charters across the state of Oregon, and there's some that powers are the requirements the mayors usually have, and there's some that they sometimes have, and we're going to talk specifically about what some of those are that are options for the Tigard future charter. So in the current requirements and powers, the mayor shall be the chair of the council and preside over its deliberations. This one, the mayor shall have a vote on all questions brought before the council. They are a full voting member of the council. 3, the mayor shall appoint the committees provided by the rules of council. So that is folks like all of you on this charter committee is how it is written in the charter. 4, the mayor shall sign all approved records of proceedings of the council and countersign all orders of the treasury. This one is a little odd, and you won't see it in the further discussions of what mayors usually have. It is usually that the mayor will sign all records of proceedings of the council unless there's a veto power. But this countersign all orders of the treasury is a fairly outdated form, and it comes from a place when city governments were much smaller. I mean, Tigard, when it was originally incorporated, had 2,000 people, and so you were having your mayor sign your checks to the bank. There was an ordinance that was passed, I believe, when Jason was mayor, that said that essentially by approving the budget, that this element of the charter has been completed, and it doesn't show up anymore in more modern charters. The next one is that the mayor shall have no veto power and shall authenticate by signature all ordinances passed by the council after being enacted. So it's a little duplicative of the mayor shall sign all approved records, but it does explicitly lay out that the mayor of Tigard does not have veto power. And the last one is that after the council approves a bond of a city officer or a bond for, it goes on, this is again a very outdated piece of the charter. City officers generally are not bonded by the city anymore. They're bonded by insurance companies, and the mayors and other elected officials aren't involved in that decision making, and you don't see that anymore in modern charters. Any questions about the powers that are currently in the charter? Jason, someone who has lived this.
Well, I'll just make a comment about the treasury part. I raised this because when I became mayor, I read the entire charter all over again, word for word, to make sure I knew all the mayor lines or mayor responsibilities. And I said, well, quite frankly, I was like, what the hell does that mean? Like, am I literally supposed to sign every check? And, you know, it really did come down to something that was from 50 years ago or 40 years ago, when it maybe made sense that the mayor signed everything, but that's totally impractical now. And that's, we were trying to figure out then, like, what do we do with this language? Because this is not, there's no possible way that that could be the way we're going to work now in 2023 or 2022 or whenever that was. So I just wanted to point that out. Like, that's obviously got to be dealt with somehow.
I'm disappointed that you didn't want to sign 300 payroll checks every 2 weeks. Jeanette, please.
Thank you. And also with regards to the third bullet, the mayor shall appoint the committees. We've always done that collaboratively as well as by consensus. And so we've reviewed in the past the different applications and have put forth those names. So just want to note that that's been collaborative.
Thank you. And John, please.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Jeanette's point. It is collaborative because of the rules of the council. And so the fact is the mayor actually appoints the, budget committee member or any other committee, and the council approves them due to the fact that the rules of the council say that. The rules of the council can change and not say that they want to based upon each council's prerogative. So when I was mayor, I actually sat on every committee where we interviewed for any position. And then I brought another counselor, whoever was the liaison to that committee, onto that. but I know not all mayors have done that. Sometimes they just have the staff bring people forward. Sometimes they just have the counselors come up. And so it's more of the rules of the council part of that that actually makes the most sense.
Yeah, and thank you, John, because that's a really good segue, because not every charter has it written this way as by the rules of the charter. There's several options, which we'll get to on this next slide. So powers and requirements that the mayors usually have, pretty cut and dry, serves as the political head of city government, which is interesting because that is not in the current Tigard charter, but it is usually in charters across the state of Oregon. And then 2, language around presiding over the council meetings as the chair, and that usually includes determining the order of business, enforcing the rules of the council, and preserving the order within the council chambers. Jason, please.
And maybe I'm wrong about this, but isn't it, you say determine the order of business, isn't it also include what the business is, like setting the agenda? It
can be. That's in some of them and not in others. Okay,
sorry. So that's on the sometimes, not on the.
No, that's in the usually have. Sorry, this isn't exhaustive, but you're right. We can definitely add that. That does show up. Apologize. And then in the sometimes have, so it's a little more detail, and there's some options here. So in Oregon, of the 29 charters that we've reviewed, or 30 charters, including Portland's, but they're a little wonky. So we really are going to focus on those other 29. The mayor is generally always either a full voting member of the council, and that means they do not have veto authority, or the mayor votes in cases of tie and has a veto authority. In no cases is there both. And in most cases, the mayor is a full voting member. That would be the majority, but there are a good 10 or so instances where the mayor votes in case of ties and does have that veto. They do still serve as the chair, determine the order of business, set the agenda, enforce the rules, and preserve order, while in either way. Second one is that, and this follows down, is the sign all records of council decisions, ordinances. Depending on any decisions around veto power, this can be worded as must sign. Again, you might have noticed in the previous slide where it lists all of Tigard Mayoral Powers, there's a lot of shalls, but in this case, we would usually use the word must if there's not a veto power. Here's another set of options. Generally, there's something that says the mayor is appointing members of committees, commissions, boards, etc. This is often according to council rules, which is as it currently is in Tigard, but it is also sometimes with the consent of council, or the mayor may nominate individuals and then the council would ratify. So there are a few options that are present there. And then the final one that I was kind of surprised by, but it showed up, I counted, in 6 charters, which was a requirement that the mayor give an annual state of the city or similar style of address to council. And in most of those charters, it even said what time of year that would be. It was usually the first meeting of the new year or the closest to it that made sense. So especially because we will talk about the state of the city later tonight, I did want to flag that that is sometimes a requirement in the charter. Let's see, any questions about these sometimes? John, please.
I don't have any questions. I have a couple comments.
Yeah.
On the comments on here, I like the mayor being a full voting member. For the main reason being, they feel a part of the council and the council feels a part with them. So they're all the same. They feel like they're on the same level, they have the same vote, so on and so forth. The reason I like that is the citizens know how the mayor feels on every issue. If the mayor only votes when there's a tie, the citizens don't know the other 95% of the time how the mayor feels on the issues. So back to Nathan's point on what the mayor does, if they're not voting, you even know less of what they do because you don't even know where they stand. So I'm not a big fan of having that. And the veto power, like you talked about, is unless it's unanimous, having the mayor have veto power doesn't make a lot of sense because it's going to end up on the same vote that happened just before that. So that makes it very difficult And then my only comment in the state of the city is, I don't think it should be in the charter. I think should be suggested that they do it, but require it in the charter does not make a lot of sense to me. And I can go over that one later if anybody has any questions about it.
That's a good segue into, I would like to move us into breakout rooms actually to discuss this. There's a lot here. So Jesse and I each have the presentation. We'll be able to share it in our groups. Specifically, some of the questions to talk about would be removing essentially the countersign all orders on the treasury and the bond requirements. And then rewriting the rest of them to be kind of in line with what these mayors usually have and as they're written in other places. And we won't get into obviously the wordsmithing of it tonight, but basically direction to Shelby to go ahead and rewrite those to meet our modern day language requirements. And then spend some time on the decision making around full voting member or member with in ties and with veto. And then if there's language here around how committees and boards are selected that appeals, and then the state of the city or similar style address. And then if there's anything else that comes up, like, so we did a pretty exhaustive look. So there isn't really a lot of other powers that we found or requirements. So just kind of talk through these, and we'll go into those groups. We've got 50 minutes left in our time tonight. So why don't we go into those groups for about 25-ish minutes. And if you need more or less time, Jesse and I will be in contact. Does that sound good to the group? Great. So I'm gonna go ahead and put us in our breakout rooms. See you soon. And Shelby, I didn't assign you to one, figuring that you might want to go check in on Jesse, and but do you?
Okay, yeah, I'll go check in on Jesse. It looks like his microphone is moving now, so that's a good sign.
You're being recorded.
So, all right, I'll go there.
This meeting is being recorded.
Apparently our group is timely.
I think Kim may have something to do with that.
I may watch the clock very carefully, not gonna lie. We also, you have the benefit of having me like announce that I'm closing the rooms. They just get a 60-second warning that pops up in front of them. I've been talking to Jesse, he knew 7:15, but it's a little different. All right, welcome back, everybody. I think everyone made it back to here. I don't see anyone in the breakout rooms. So why don't we go ahead and do report outs? And why don't we start with group 2?
You're gonna mix it up.
Mm-hmm.
So group 2, the order I wrote down, they're not the order we discussed them in. So we said the mayor have a state of the city should not be in the charter, but it should be an ordinance or something listed that where we feel that they should have it, but it shouldn't be in the charter. We say that the mayor shouldn't have to sign checks and or other treasury documents or anything else that's stated in there. Remove anything else financially that shouldn't be required of a larger council. We said the mayor should vote and not have veto powers, but we talked about could the mayor have a weighted vote? And so the discussion was if the mayor had a vote, say of 2, and the only worry of that was if we added counselors, we would only add, let's say, 1 extra counselor because we still would want an odd number if the mayor's vote got 2. So not saying everybody was suggesting that, we thought we should discuss that. So should the mayor have more power in somehow being maybe having a weighted vote, in other words, 2 votes, would that give them more power? And if that's so, make sure when we talk about the numbers of counselors that we don't end up with a tie. We talked about the mayor should approve the agenda, but we needed to be cautious of open meetings laws when agenda setting. So the mayor shouldn't be discussing with the counselors. So we should make sure that when we write the charter, it doesn't say anything about mayor discussing with the counselors about agenda setting, because that has problems with the open meetings laws. In the boards and committees, we feel that the way it's set now with the rules of the council is a good way to leave it.
Great. Thank you. You guys were efficient. And let's see, Carol, would you like to report out from our group?
Yeah, so group 2 wanted to remove the countersigning all orders and the bond language. We do want the mayor to have a vote. One of the powers and requirements that mayors usually have serves as the political head of the city government. We were concerned about the word political because that might be off-putting to some people who may not feel they share the same political views. So we were thinking maybe the policy head, the visible head, the elected head, are just some ideas. They, as far as presiding over council meetings, they set the agenda, but there should be a clause that allows council to add items. And in practice, we do have that non-agenda option, but it was brought up to codify that. They do determine the order of the business, enforce rules, preserve order. At the end, we didn't really talk about demanding the state of the city in the charter, but the feeling was not to. As far as appointing members, it was felt that council could, that could be in the council rules, and it could be a collaborative process. So make that, yes, they're appointed, but per council rules.
Thank you, Carol. It's a great
And-
summary.
And they would sign all records, all council records.
Sounds like at our next meeting, we have a lot of agreement, but there's a couple places to discuss. Interested in the discussions, especially around maybe a weighted vote for the mayor. That would be interesting. Speaking of, does anyone from either of those groups have anything to add that wasn't mentioned in the recaps? Jason, please.
Can I just ask what the, like, was the weighted vote, where'd that idea come from? And was that or more importantly, is that used somewhere else? Kim, maybe you can comment on that, or Shelby, or was that just an organic idea that some smart person dreamed up?
I can say it is not used anywhere else, but I think Nathan's going to tell us where it came from.
Well, I dreamed it up. I wouldn't say a smart person dreamed it up because it was me. But so where that all came from was previous meeting. One of the things that was at the forefront of my mind and still is that I think when people vote for a mayor, they aren't just, I think they have kind of a vestigial idea of a strong mayor from 100 years ago in their mind, and they're not thinking, oh, I'm just voting for the person who presides over the council. That I'm voting for someone who has some special powers, even if they can't elaborate on what those are. So that's kind of what motivated it. Part of it also came from, I was not fully aware how much control the mayor has over setting the agenda for meetings, because my only experience of agendas in city meetings is on committees, and that's usually set by staff. So that's the concern where that idea came from, but it was, for me anyway, it was somewhat alleviated by the fact that mayors can set the agenda. But as John talked about, we did discuss a little bit, well, maybe we need to explicitly say that in the charter, that the mayor has final approval over agenda.
Excellent. Came up in our group as well. So definitely some food for thought for next meetings. So let's go ahead and look at our schedule coming up, because there's a couple concerns. So we just finished up our March 20th meeting, moved through high capacity transit and formal government, and we are on elected officials. We will pick up where we left off in this big room talking about mayoral powers and move through, I think we're going to move through mayoral selection pretty quickly and probably move into councilors and council powers on April 10th. And then we're looking at April 24th, and this is where State of the City came up. State of the City is on April 24th. So I've already talked to Planning Commission, which is our reason for not being able to meet like on the other Monday, and they're not planning on meeting in April. So if everyone in this group is okay with that, I would suggest that we move our April 24th meeting to a week earlier and do that on April 17th. Okay, so we're going to do that. So that will be on April 17th. Everyone can attend the State of the City. And then we'll continue working through May and June.
And Kim, you'll just send out a calendar reminder that that date has been changed.
Okay, I can do that.
Thank you.
And then, so our next meeting will be April 10th. And it's a little bit odd because we do have, I think, 3 full weeks between now and then. So I don't usually send out our meeting minutes, but for this one I will prior to our next meeting, and we'll do a pretty good recap at the beginning of our next meeting just to make this conversation fresh again. So I know that's a long time between sessions. Okay. And as always, greatly appreciate all of your work and reading through those materials and coming to these meetings prepared and with great questions. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Monday night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.